Welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast with Scott McKenzie. Scott is a passionate industry professional dedicated to transferring cutting-edge, industry-focused innovations and trends while highlighting the men and women who keep the world moving. So put on your hard hat, grab your work boots, and let's go.
All right, once again, thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast, the number one industrial-related podcast in the universe, where we celebrate industry heroes like you. You are the miracle. You are the hope. You are the individuals that create dreams. You're bold, you're brave, you dare greatly, you solve problems, you're always curious, and that's why you're changing lives and you're changing the world. We have a great interview. Her name is Christine Witte. Now, it's spelled W-I-T-T-E, but it's pronounced Witte. And she's got a major stat card out there. Let's get cracking. Yeah, we're going to be talking about safety on this podcast. And it's always been an interesting dilemma, personally, is that when we start talking about safety, the data, well, for whatever reason, the data never really changes. The focus is always on safety. I see all of the wonderful posters out there, right? In the workplace saying, hey, you're the reason to be safe, all of that good stuff, trying to be motivational. But the data doesn't support that. And I've always been fascinated. Christine came to me and she says, Scott, I think an interesting way of looking at safety is this. Safety should be prioritized across all verticals of the industry. Yes. But what if everyone looked at safety the way that we look at our children? Yeah. Why not? Why is it sort of all of a sudden different when we step out of the house, we go to our location, and we say safety is important, but we just continue and sort of go through the motions. But then all of a sudden, you're not going to let your kids just run across the street without being safe. You're not going to let your children do something like climb a ladder without being safe or explaining some of the challenges. I think that's a brilliant point of view. All right. Again, I'm going to be harping on these events because I want, me personally, selfish reason, get back to normal as much as we possibly can. I want to get back to normal. I want to have fun. I want to be able to continue to just sort of sing the praises of industry. First event that I want to put on my calendar would be October 5th through the 7th. And it is in beautiful Barcelona. And if you've never been to Barcelona, it is a must. I mean, you got to go to that town. It's great. And hopefully I'll be broadcasting from that location, but it's a great event. Brought to you by IoT Solutions World Congress, FARA Barcelona, and the Industrial Internet Consortium. Great people putting on a great program. Last year it was canceled, of course. This year, boom. You got to put that on your calendar. That is, once again, October 5th through the 7th this year. The next event is in Cleveland, Ohio, and is the Manufacturing and Technology Show. This is November 9th through the 11th. And again, I was in Cleveland last year. Wonderful people, great food, exceptional venue. Again, a wonderful opportunity to get back to normal. Go to that Manufacturing and Technology Show, November 9th through the 11th. But fear not, all of this information will be out on industrialtalk.com homepage, which we are redesigning as we speak, so that you don't have to struggle finding these great events or great learning opportunities or wonderful speakers. Right there, right now. All right, great stat card on Christine Witte. So you got to reach out to her. And she's with the SEAM Group. And let's just check out her. She's the Director of Products and Service with SEAM Group. The website SEAM Group, that's SEAM Group. Christine Witte, like city. Enjoy the interview. Christine, welcome to the Industrial Talk Podcast. Absolute honor that you found time in your busy schedule to be on the number one industrial-related podcast in the universe, and I mean that from my heart. How are you doing?
I'm great, Scott. Thank you for having me here today.
Excellent. You are absolutely wonderful. I'm excited about the conversation in safety. Just let's level set a little bit. You're with the SEAM Group. Give us a little background on what you do with SEAM.
Yes, of course. I'm with Seam Group. We are focused on reliability, maintenance, and safety. I am the Director of Product and Services. And today we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, safety.
I love it because let's just lay it out just right there. Let's be candid about it. We talk a lot about safety, but for whatever reason, we still don't make a dent in the data.
Exactly.
And what I like about Seam Group is that I've had conversations about reliability, I've had conversations about maintenance, and I have conversations about safety, but it's marrying those two. But you have a unique approach to how we look at safety, and I gotta tell you, I'm a big fan of that approach. So with that said, let's talk a little bit about that. We're looking at, and I think because you're a mother of four, beautiful children, looking at safety from the perspective of kids is a real powerful way of looking at it. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're missing in the industrial space. It's desensitized and it's not emotional for us. But if you put yourselves in the shoes of a parent and you look at safety, the way that you protect your children, it's very emotional. It's always top of mind. You don't, even if you're late for school, you don't rush, across the road when cars are flying by. You still take the exact steps you need to take to keep your children safe. But what we see in the industrial space is quite the opposite. We see this lax way of approaching safety where you've done it once, so you can do it again. And there isn't that emotional tie to it. If anything, safety is almost an antithesis of the productivity, because if you make a mistake, you're punished for it, and your peers look down on you. And it's there's not an advocate for safety in the way that there's an advocate for protecting your children.
No, you big time hit the nail on the head. You're absolutely spot on. I guarantee you, companies out there, we have the conversation. Things happen. If you're moving around out in the field, things happen. Yeah. And those things that are happening could be unsafe and could be near, and nobody wants to get into an accident or whatever, but we do. And then when that happens, we get the hammer thrown down on us, and we learn quickly how to fudge and not look at the numbers properly, whatever it might be.
We know we penalize, so we want to hide, and that penalization is driving a problem, because then we probably aren't being transparent about all of the things that are unsafe. Nope. And there isn't that closed loop process. It's very much it's an opposing relationship, and I think that there's no compromise. There's no new, diverse, or innovative way of looking at it, and we really need to change that, Scott. It's if you look at the statistics, you would actually be appalled.
What are the statistics? Give us an example.
One from a webinar that Terry O'Hanlon, he's a big reliability leader, great mentor of mine. 10 times more industrial technicians die per year than first responders from accidents in the industrial space that could have been prevented. We know where all these failure modes are. We know where all these hazards sit, but we rush, or we forget, or a manager's pushing for something to be completed, and that particular person wasn't the skilled worker that should have completed that task. There's all these reasons why they happen, but technicians aren't first responders. They shouldn't be risking their lives every day. I mean, to me, that doesn't sit well with me. And then you look at OSHA. The intent of OSHA was to drive safety. And for 50 years, they've been putting all these processes and regulations in place. But in the last 10 years, the serious injuries and fatalities have increased, or they've plateaued. They have not decreased, like some of those slips and falls, right? So why? There's a lot of reasons. One thing that we've talked about at SEAM is there's this disproportionate relationship between the minor injuries and the serious injuries. And we take the same approach to safety that we do with slips and falls to burns and crushes, basically, which are the ones that are the biggest. Yeah. The biggest reason for lost lives. And it's this
is the culture. It's just, I don't know what it would take. And I'll give you an example. If I go out to whatever social platforms out there, okay, fine. And I look and I scroll and I zip, I will always fall upon my heartbreaking for that abandoned dog. I will always look at things differently. But then when it comes to people in the field, in the plants, whatever. You become, like you said, desensitized. What do we do? What do we do to change that mindset?
We become desensitized because we're looking at a fine, or we're looking at a piece of paper that shows the reduction in our safety rating. We're not looking at the life that was lost. We're not hearing the story about that gentleman at 30 years old who got electrocuted and doesn't go home to his family and his kids. That is something you can't be desensitized to. You remember that. But instead, we see, so-and-so, let's just say Johnson Controls, has been decreased to a level or a safety rating of B, which means that their vendors won't let them in. And that's what we think about. And that's the wrong way to think about it. It's
a punitive financial motivator, unfortunately. And you're right. Anybody out there knows that doors will be closed. My financial livelihood will be impacted if I come. And that's at all levels. I can't get into businesses. I can't get hired. All of this, it happens everywhere. And so you are incentivizing people to not tell the truth, fudge the numbers, just because I got to keep my doors open. I don't know where you start.
Yeah, let's go back to kids. So we think about how we raise our children to speak up if they see something unsafe. If they see a stranger, it's stranger danger, and they scream it, and they have no problem. There's no mental model holding them back from being very vocal about what's not safe, or tattletaling when their sister or brother does something unsafe. But in the industrial space, we see something, but we don't necessarily say something because we feel that I may be penalized for bringing this up, or maybe it's not a big deal because I don't have the skill set or the knowledge or the experience to know that that is actually a very big hazard that I should be mitigating. It's just not clear. It's not part of the culture. And we have all these trainings and education, but it doesn't stick. You'll see an increase maybe in, safer ways of doing things, but then a month later, it's back to normal because that change process hasn't been put in place, that it hasn't been ingrained in their souls, in their hearts, the way it is when we protect our kids. I mean, that's the only real way I can think about it. And if we compare it to other industries, like let's look at healthcare, the innovation that happened. Look at COVID. The 10 years it takes to go through the drug trials, now we do it in 6 months. Right. 3 pharmaceutical companies did it in 6 months. They came together knowing we had no choice. That innovation needs to happen in the industrial space. How? I think there's a technology-enabled part of this. I don't know specifically what that is. Same Group is looking into different things like heat mapping to show risk. So you actually know what that risk could be based on the different processes within the plant, and they change, the different workers, the different processes, the different regions. But you still, as a human, have to take ownership. And from the top down, it has to be cultural.
It's interesting. It's always a human element. It's always the necessity for somebody to truly champion it, who has the swag for whatever reason to be able to instill and move forward with change. Because the reality is, somebody comes flying in, hey, we're going to be a safety-centric whatever company. And then that individual flies back out. Nothing really happens. Business takes over. I need to, make my production numbers. That means I've got to cut corners. That means I've got to do things that are unacceptable. And you know what the problem is? Everybody does the same thing. It's not just one person that's just being a cowboy out there and I'm just blazing a trail. No, everybody's doing it. And I think a way of possibly moving that needle just a little bit. It has to be down at the local level, but you have to do it incrementally so that it creates, I think you said, stickiness. Tell us, what do you think?
Yeah, I think as you're saying that, I'm thinking about something that's personal to me, but it's worth sharing because it shows that it's an ecosystem of different players that must come together, from the leadership to the manufacturer, so the OEMs, to the regulators, to the reinsurers. So I think about my daughter, Lily, when she was they were all born very premature. They were triplets, right? Of course they're born premature. But they were doing pretty well. And Lily was on an oxygen blender that was supposed to be giving out a certain amount of oxygen. And that dial was set on room air, which is 21%.
Right.
Lily never desatted. And if you think about, your oxygen levels, you desat all day long, a little bit here, a little bit there. Lily was always at 100%. So right there, that's an anomaly that someone should have questioned. Everybody called her super baby instead. They didn't question why, knowing they'd never seen that before. They just thought, wow, she's a super baby. Okay, but then when they would take her off to clean her, she would desat drastically. So they just assumed she doesn't like baths. But as a clinician, you know that that's not realistic. And the layers of ignorance beneath those assumptions, it wasn't anyone's fault, but there wasn't that culture of, it doesn't look right, so let's question it. Let's come together and round table on it. A couple weeks later, Lily's getting triaged for her retinal development and tortuosity of her blood vessels because of over-oxygenation. So toxic levels of oxygen are being saturated into her blood vessels, which in her retina, which is known as retinopathy of prematurity. And that is common in babies that need a lot more oxygen to stay alive so that they can actually, their brain can develop, but in babies that don't need it, it's very detrimental. And it's kind of a scale that the clinician has to weigh very carefully. So long story short, that oxygen blender was miscalibrated during a preventative maintenance. And there was no way to actually confirm that that preventative maintenance was done correctly. And then that 21% was giving off 21%. It was opposite, it was giving off 70%. So what happened then is the standard of care changed. Now every oxygen blender, every baby that goes on a blender, they check it with a dial to make sure that it is actually calibrated correctly. And every time they change it, they recheck it. So they've created some sort of redundancy so that the last line of defense isn't that sticker on the back of the oxygen blender.
Right.
In the industrial space, we don't do that. We don't. And then outside of that, even the OEMs get involved now, and the manufacturers of the pulse oximeters and the digital analyzers that show you what you're really getting. They all get involved and they talk about this issue that occurred, the new standard of care, and the safety net to prevent it from happening again. And it's spread throughout the NICUs, right? Because they come together to say we're going to protect babies going forward from ever having this happen again. But we don't do that in the industrial space. We hide it. It's under the rug. We don't hear about it. We just know there was a fine. Someone died. On with your business. There has to be some sort of way that all these stakeholders come together and they say no more. As a manufacturer of this equipment, this energized asset, let's say, as a regulator, as a reinsurer, as a company who has people that are employed to do a job, all of these people within this ecosystem need to come together and create a safety net around safety. And I think when that happens, it's not so disparate. It's not so siloed. It's not so opposing. It's a commitment and a family and a culture, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I think that really, from my perspective, the only way that I see it really getting done, it's got to be one company at a time. That company has to realize that maybe there will be difficult conversations. And in those difficult conversations, you can't sit there and hammer people and teach them to hold back. It's got to be inclusive. And everybody's like, that is the mindset to have. I'll give you an example. When I was a lineman, climbing towers, we didn't have people falling out of the sky. There's no way, right? You knew what the risks were. You looked around, you had that conversation. They weren't just touching, energized lines.
No.
That didn't happen. You would have these conversations all the time. You were aware of the risks. You were, and it's life or death, right? It's either or. It's on or off. It doesn't matter. And it's amazing that our conversations were around like that safety. And people weren't, like I said, falling out of the sky, kicking it. And I believe in a manufacturing or a highly complex system, unlike maybe line work where you see it in front of you. You've got different locations within an organization requiring different sensitivities. That level of knowledge has to amp it up from a safety perspective too.
You just covered a few things that are part of the problem. Is there's a continuously growing gap in skilled workers, right?
Yes.
It's a very big problem. I'm on a government relations committee for this problem to try to create apprenticeships to fill that gap as all of these workers age out. But then you have these mechanical systems, these electrical systems that are much more complicated and have all these different components that there's just no awareness or knowledge bank on how to appropriately maintain them, how to even inspect them, what type of protective equipment to have when you inspect them. And that's where I believe technology is going to help us there. But the complexity of these innovative systems and the skills gap, that's something that I wouldn't want to be responsible for.
And you bring up a really interesting challenge. Like when I was a lineman, I went through an apprenticeship program. It took 4 or 5 years to get to a second step journeyman.
Yep.
And it was, you're doing it, you're working it, and you understood. And it was an apprenticeship, and you had to take tests. You had to progress. Anyway, it seems to me that commitment to education from an industrial perspective and an apprenticeship approach is lacking too. And that means, and the sophistication of the assets that exist in the field today have just went through the roof. It's not just a pump. It's a pump with a lot of tech to it.
And the people designing those are these brilliant engineers that don't understand the use case for the actual, how they take shape in a plant. I had an intern last summer, and she's a mechanical engineer at Duke. She had no idea what reliability and maintainability of these assets meant. She didn't know it was a field. She didn't even understand that when these systems are commissioned, how they're maintained across their asset life cycle. And that to me was like, wow, we need to do a better job while these, during the education phase of it, but also they're complex because these kids are, STEM, computer lab, everything is techie. What happened to just the normal trade school? Like those, I don't think they're there anymore. At least, my high school, I could have went to shop. I could have went to home ec. I could have went to, become a cosmetologist. Now those programs, there's no funding, and they've been replaced with computer labs, which of course, that's a great thing for advancing that part of where we're going. And we need that because it's automation, it's digitalization. We need to have those skills, but we're going to still need people to fix these machines, to maintain these machines, to understand how to. That's a big gap, big problem.
I think if you could communicate a level of sophistication, before you were just like a wrench turner over here, and that's where you were going in your wrench turner. That's not the case. I look at the profession of reliability, the profession of safety, the profession of maintenance like a doctor. And if you can communicate, you've got a sick asset out there, and you're consuming the data. You're looking at it, you're assessing the situation, and then you're going to apply, whatever the care needs to be. We have a need to be able to communicate and to be able to make sure that it's not a wrench turner. It's far more important. It's sophistication.
It is. That's when you mentioned the doctor, it's like, have you heard of those concierge doctors where they really manage your wellness, not just your physical exam, it's your wellness. It's your, it's all inclusive. So I don't go once a year to get checked. I am managed 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, to ensure that I am well and that I am mitigating things that will make me unwell, staying ahead of them. We don't do that with assets. We check them because we have to. Yep, check off, got my piece of paper, I'm done. I think we need a concierge way of maintaining these pieces of equipment. And I think that's exactly what weaves together safety, reliability, and maintenance. So potentially that's where the issue is, or that's where the opportunity is. And we now need to figure out how to land that and expand it to make it stick.
Yeah, and I love the term stickiness because you're absolutely spot on. I've been involved with many organizations. Everybody talking like we're going to be a reliability-centric organization. You come back 6 year or a year from now, and it's all falling apart. Safety, they've gone, all right, we're going to put up all the posters around, but it still doesn't change it. And their maintenance is still reactive and still causing a lot of problems.
Yes, you're exactly right.
It just happens. And I don't know. And it's cultural. Doggone it. If you can come up, if Seam Group can come up with a cogent way of being able to create that whole holistic view of moving forward and keeping people safe and assets up and running and maintenance. Oh gosh.
I have no doubt we will. I mean, we're all very passionate about it, and we understand what needs to happen. We know we'll get there. We're figuring out exactly how to get there so that it does solve these problems across regions and different use cases, because it isn't a one size fits all. It has to be flexible, and we have to be able to tweak it for our audience and for whatever they're doing, in that space.
You have to. One size does not fit all, and you're absolutely spot on, and you're going to have that insight and vision to be able to adjust and to mold that program. All right. You had me at safety. How do people get a hold of you?
I can be reached pretty much any email, text, phone. LinkedIn, find me on LinkedIn. Christine O'Rourke Witte is where it's you'll find me. But go to seamgroup.com, check out our website, check out our LinkedIn page. You'll see me on there. And I look forward to talking to you guys. If you have any ideas for us, if you have a challenge that we can solve for you, we'd love to help. Again, it's a great group. We're very passionate about what we're doing and where we're going. I
have to say that I love that that triad view of, and I'm looking out at the website, the Seam Group website, which is really nice. That triad view of safety, reliability, and maintenance. Yes, but in the real world, we always like maintenance is over here. Reliability is that person in the thing, and safety is over here. It's not across, but it is across. It is a part of that. Well, you were just absolutely wonderful, Christine. Now, listeners, her last name is Witte, Witte, like city, and Seam Group, SEAMGROUP is the organization. Absolutely great team out there. Good job, Christine.
Thank you, Scott. It was a pleasure.
All right, listeners, we're going to wrap it up on the other side, so fear not. We're going to have all the contact information of Christine and the Seam Group, so stay tuned.
You're listening to the Industrial Talk Podcast Network.
All right, what did I tell you? Did you like that topic? I thought that topic was exceptional. If everyone looked at safety the way we looked at our children, things would be changed. That data would go down in a big way. Seam Group is a company. Check her out. Great stat card out on LinkedIn. You will not be disappointed. All right. To reiterate, we've got a couple of events. Let's get back to normal. We've got one, October 5th through the 7th. This is IoT Solutions World Congress. This is brought to you by Ferro Barcelona and the Industrial Internet Consortium. Both absolutely great people, great companies, put on a great show. The other one is the Manufacturing and Technology Show. That is November 9th through the 11th. Get your tuchus up to Cleveland and enjoy this particular event because you will not be disappointed. All right, be bold, be brave. Dare greatly. Hang out with people who are bold, brave, daring greatly. Be the creator of dreams. Be the miracle. Be the hope. That's what industry is all about. Thank you very much for joining the Industrial Talk Podcast. We're going to have another great interview right around the corner.